Hello, welcome to this edition of Momentum. I'm Robert Green, your host. I'm the Associate Dean for Academics in the Bagley College of Engineering here at Mississippi State. I'm happy today to be joined by Dr. Bill Elmore. Dr. Elmore is the director of the Dave C. Swalm School of Chemical Engineering, a professor there, and he also holds the Earnie Deavenport chair for that position. Welcome, Dr. Elmore.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
It's been a while since you've been here. About 3 years ago, I think, was the last
flies,
time
yes.
it does fly. So welcome to have you here.
It's good to be here.
Last time you were here, we talked about your school, chemical and petroleum engineering majors. And we'll talk a little bit about that today too. But I also want to talk a little bit about you. So tell us about your childhood. How did you grow up? I know one of the questions I always get from prospective students is, they want to do engineering because they were good at math or science, or they like to take things apart. But I understand you weren't like that.
Not really. I think one thing that put me in tune with some of our alumni and prospective students as I talked to them is that I came about engineering somewhat indirectly. I had actually gone to school to major in music. Now that didn't necessarily last long. I'd gone to a small private school, but in being at that school, I was around a lot of pre-med, pre-dental. The school, in fact, the sciences were primarily for preparing students to go that route. So I considered that a little bit. But several individuals back home, some of my high school mates, 3 of them, in fact, were thinking chemical engineering. One was in it. Another one was just getting ready to start. Well, that opened a thought to me that I never even thought about engineering. I knew one student in my graduating class in 1977 who was going off to engineering, but I had no one in the family that was tied to it. So when they began talking about it, as I would come home for holidays and things from my school, they were at the University of Arkansas. And so I thought, well, one of my buddies was transferring to Fayetteville. I thought, well, I'll give it a try. It was pretty tough. You walk into it not prepared in math and science, it's quite an eye-opener. But I fell in love with it. I began to see things I'd never even thought about, the way the world works. Actually had one of my peers in town who's an optometrist. He said he went to school with someone who was an engineering major, and he said, boy, I wish I'd done that. And I said, what is it about it? He said, it's the way you see the world works. That's what he really admired, and that's what opened to me when I got into chemical engineering.
Yeah. Well, do you have any words of wisdom for those students out there who maybe aren't thinking about engineering now?
Well, what I tell prospective students, if they even high school, junior high, middle school, I talk to students all the time, and I'm trying to impress upon them, take the math, do the mathematics, regardless of what major you're thinking about. The math serves you well in all disciplines. I mean, the arts, the sciences, in all disciplines. The world is mathematics. While I was not prepared as I needed to be, and the catch-up was hard, that's the emphasis I put on it with students, the mathematics. Yes.
I would say I've never heard of anybody being turned down for a job because they knew too much math.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all, yeah.
Well, over the years, over the decades, you've clearly had some really great graduates from your program there, and probably certainly more than we can talk about here. But there are some that sort of stand out. One of those is Dave Swalm, the one who endowed the school. Can you tell us a little bit about Dave and what he did and how he got to the point where he could endow the School of Chemical Engineering?
I'll tell you, one of the things that I was very privileged and have always treasured was getting to meet some of our alumni, our distinguished alumni, who had such an impact on this place. When I first came here in '05, actually came to campus and got lost at Malfunction Junction during a rainstorm. That was my coming to the interview. And anyway, I got to meet Dave, and he was very high energy. He knew what he wanted and went after it. And when he had that vision to build into chemical engineering here, he went lock, stock, and barrel. And I know that the plans that he and officials made in putting Swalm School on the drill field was visionary. I think it was very, very much a long-term vision to make a statement and matching it to Lee Hall. I think Lee Hall had been very had a lot of nostalgia to him. I think he went to classes there. And so to match it as a bookend to the drill field was great vision. And he went about everything he did that way, just great energy, wanted what he wanted.
Yeah.
And we have benefited greatly as a result.
And of course, then the other one, Earnie Deavenport comes to mind. Ernie's another great alum that we have, and works at Eastman Chemical and endowed your chair. What can you tell us about Ernie?
Well, Ernie, I know he was very influential in the transition when Kodak Chemicals, when Eastman Kodak recognized the decline of photography in terms of the old tradition with film and that sort of thing. They decided to spin off Eastman into Eastman Chemicals. And Ernie transitioned and oversaw that transition into purely chemicals. Actually, my oldest son, he worked with Eastman Chemical over in Longview, Texas. And so Ernie was a very great benefactor of our program. He endowed a number of things and has had the privilege of meeting him and his family as they came around over the years. And just to see the passion that these alumni had for giving back to Mississippi State and for investing in the lives of the students here. I think about that all the time. The stewardship and the responsibility that I have is heavily impressed upon me by these individuals.
Yeah, they've certainly done a lot. Don't want to leave petroleum engineering out, and we certainly have some good graduates there. But one that comes to mind, mainly because we've been working with them a lot here lately, is Randy Cleveland and his wife Nina. Of course, Randy was vice president of ExxonMobil Americas, retired from there, and we're currently constructing the Cleveland Engineering Students Center, which is going to be a place for students to hang out between classes.
Their impact has been far and wide across the campus. A number of initiatives that have impacted not just engineering, but well beyond that. So yes, Randy and Nina are a very great couple.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about Randy is he's a community college graduate.
Oh, that's right.
So what can you tell us about the success of community college transfer students?
Oh, very high. I would say some of our top students have come from the community college system. I've been privileged in the roles I've had here at Mississippi State to travel around the state, visit various community colleges, speak to students who are considering engineering in general, and hopefully win a few to chemical or petroleum. But we have seen, especially through the Phi Theta Kappa Scholarship Program, we have gotten top students across the state who have come to Mississippi State and done very well in their engineering studies, and then going on to great careers. This is my 21st year this fall that I'm starting at Mississippi State, my 37th year of higher education, and to see how Mississippi State graduates have performed. I heard about Mississippi State engineers before I came here in 05, that a lot of my co-op students would come back to my previous institution and say, yeah, those Mississippi State, they're all over the place at our company. And I just thought that was really great. It is a thrill to me to come here and serve.
Yeah. So I know one person who really you hold near and dear to your heart is Hunter Henry. Unfortunately, Hunter's not with us any longer, but endowed the chair and was actually responsible for recruiting you to join our faculty here. Tell us a little bit about Hunter and what he did and the impact he's had.
Well, Hunter, I would say, is probably the alumnus of that era that I knew the most. I tell students, and somewhat seriously, that I interviewed as much with him as I did with Mississippi State. Hunter called a number of times when I first made application and the conversation began to get serious with officials here at State. He began to call more than once. I mean about once a week, because I found out the year that I came in the fall of 05, I actually began the process of talking to Mississippi State that spring. So it was a pretty fast transition process. And Hunter would call and he wanted to have the assurance, Bill, what is your vision for students? You know, his vision for the undergraduate teaching chair of the Hunter Henry Chair that he and the family have endowed was very strong. He put a lot of money in on AIChE, the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. That's the umbrella group serving chemical engineering, and he invested heavily in that. They now have their own investment portfolio that was established by the Hunter Henry family. So that endowment has seen them through a number of years of recognition. They've well over 20 years of being selected as an outstanding student chapter. And Hunter just had that vision that he wanted to ensure the Hunter Henry chair would maintain that vision throughout time. And I feel it's been held very well. Our current chair, Dr. Jessup, Julie Jessup, has done a marvelous job in continuing that vision.
Yeah. So we mentioned AIChE. Tell us a little bit about some of their accomplishments and how students can get involved in it.
The thing that Hunter impressed on me and that I think we've tried to live up to are the pillars of scholarship, leadership, and service. And that you say, well, that's common, that's apple pie for all of engineering or all of Mississippi State students, and that's true. But really emphasizing that in the sense that we try to schedule a number of community outreach activities, K through 12, service in the parks and recreation, doing things that serve the community. And I think that has been well recognized. In fact, one of the visitors from the national AIChE New York office came to our campus some years ago when I was in that position and said, we've not seen this level of service at most campuses. And so that was one thing that got us a good recognition at the national level, but also just the opportunity to build back in our students' lives by teaching them to give back.
Yeah, and they are consistently winning awards.
They are.
And
they
with
have
competitions and annual meetings.
Absolutely. Student involvement, a lot of scholarships that go to one or a few people across the nation. Actually, beyond, I mean, some of these awards are global, and our students are regularly recognized in receiving those awards. Okay.
We've got about a minute and a half left or so. So in that time, we've talked some about chemical and petroleum engineers, and of course the great success they've had with their traditional careers. But you also have some students who have gone to med school and law school and pharmacy school. Tell us a little bit about that and why a student might want to choose engineering, maybe specifically chemical engineering, rather than say pre-law.
I'll circle back. We send someone to law, pharmacy, medical, dental, almost every year. And you say, well, why would you do that? The idea is that it's what that optometrist said. It's the way you look. You do as much science as the pre-meds, the pre-dentals. You know, you practice writing, you practice all the skills that are normally done in pre-law, and these students perform very well on those preliminary tests, those entrance tests, and I've heard time and again, I've met practicing physicians, practicing dentists who've said, yeah, I was a chemical engineer in your program, and it served me well.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. In fact, my best friend in college went through chemical engineering together and ended up in med school. Well, Dr. Elmore, you obviously have a great school, and I know you've got a lot of alumni who support that, and we're certainly appreciative of all of them and the work they do. But it's been a pleasure having you today, and hopefully we won't have to wait another 3 years before we do it again.
Well,
but thanks for joining us.
It was great. Thank you.
And I want to thank you all for joining us on this edition of Momentum, and look forward to seeing you next time.